not necessarily tribal or regional.
All right, welcome back and thank you for staying with us. Now we'll take a look at the headlines or the stories on the front page of the national dailies. We'll begin with Daily Trust newspaper, and the lead story here talks about ripples over Obi's religious war phone conversation with Oyedepo. We have writers here that says leaked audio authentic, says Labour Party. It is fake, says Obi Dirty Media Office. I've never campaigned for politicians, Living Faith Bishop. Obi's presidential ambition dead, says Tinubu campaign. We're studying the situation, says CAN, NSCIA and JNI. Weaponizing religion dangerous, says Sheikh Khalid and Namani, also Professor Kari. If you want to read up more on that story, you find it on pages 4 and 6. At the top of the page there, we have FCTA sends 217 beggars back to Katsina, Kano, Kebbi, others. Over 80,000 Nigerians require heart surgeries every year, says experts. Bandits kill 7 farmers, abduct 26 in Niger, pick 2 students at Varsity Hostel in Zamfara State. Details of that on page 39. Furor over Kano Governor-elect's public advisory. We also have 133 billion naira hangers to give way for MMIA apron expansion. Post-election violence, police arrest 17 more suspects in Zamfara State. And the federal government deploys 12 billion naira fire trucks to Lagos, Kano and Abuja airports. These are some of the stories on Daily Trust newspaper.
Next newspaper we're looking at is the Punch newspaper, and it carries the story on the front page. End of tenure, Buhari Osibanjo, 28 governors, ministers to begin asset declaration. It comes with writers here that says outgoing public office holders must declare assets by May 29th. That is according to a CCB official. And President-elect Tinubu Shetima, 28 incoming governors, get CCB form this month. Details of that story can be found on page 2 of the Punch newspaper. Moving towards the bottom of the front page there, Pope Kagame preach love service as Christians observe Palm Sunday. Ramadan, why the aged may abstain from fasting. And that story can be found on page 20. 22-year-old Ogun lady found dead in room, boyfriend held. And tanker fire worsens Lagos-Ibadan Expressway gridlock. Moving towards the top of the front page there above the masthead, Chinese loans rise by 209% under Buhari. Details of that can be found on page 27. And Nigeria Exchange suspends Sterling Bank share trading. And you can find that story on page 33. Finally, on the front page of the Punch newspaper, FG to demolish Lagos Airport jet hangars April 15th. And you can find details of that story on page 30.
All right, up next is the Nation newspaper, and we'll start from the top of the page there. Why PDP's NEC BOT governors can't save IU. We also have investors made 1.6 trillion naira gains in first quarter. 25-year-old South African wins Big Brother Titan $100,000. We also have Pope Francis urges all to unite, pray for peace. Just below the nameplates there, Chelsea, Leicester sack coaches. Buhari, Tinubu hail Anthony Joshua, and these are in sports. Governors, the lead story here says governors NFIU on collision course over cash withdrawal. A writer says you can't spend cash, agency tells helmsman of states. We also have China loans to Africa transparent. Trump flies to New York for arraignment. Federal government borrowed 3.17 trillion naira in 3 months. How proceeds from petrol subsidy removal should be used, says Man LCCI list options. And on the footnotes there, we have cholera infected 922, killed 32 in 9 weeks, says NCDC. These are some of the stories on the Nation.
Next, we'll take a look at this day newspaper. This is major story on the front page. Tinubu begins team building, considers Gbajia Biamila chief of staff. And it comes with writers here that says Wale Edun Bagudu also in high consideration for key roles. Shoyinka advises president-elect to either restructure Nigeria or fail. insists nation won't cease demanding change. Moving towards the top of the front page, there is a story. Falana, President can't withhold assent to constitution alteration bills. And the writer here says no president must sign. Justice Okeke ruled in 2010. And at the very top of the front page there, Reuters survey. At about 1.6 million barrels per day, Nigeria's oil production was OPEC's biggest increase in March. And expert urges the next government to place independent, powerful regulator for oil and gas industry. Says regulator in mode of CBN, NCC needed to strengthen oil sector activities for increased foreign exchange earnings. And Wike's police arrested APC lawyers filing petitions in Rivers. Cole alleges, that is a story on page 43. Now, these are the major stories on the front page of this day newspaper.
All right, well, with that, we'll move on to the Guardian newspaper. And we start from the top of the page there. 28 women die daily of cervical cancer in Nigeria. Details of that on page 3. Investors gain 2.54 trillion naira in first quarter as market dams political risks. How underfunding abuse mar master plans in universities, polytechnics. We also have ICC's arrest warrant on Putin and issues of enforceability. The lead story here talks about the religious war. Obi's leaked phone call with Oyedepo raises dust. And we have writers that says leaked audio on Obi Oyedepo deep fake, says LP campaign. Okonkwo audio taken out of context. Obi spokesman blames NCC for leaked call. We also have I have never campaigned for any politician, says Oyedepo. And Namani says Obi introduced religious ethnic politics. Now, Pope celebrates Palm Sunday Mass after hospital stay, defends the abandoned, and Kosi wins first BB Titans. These are some of the stories on the Guardian newspaper.
Next, we'll take a look at the Nigerian Tribune and the major story on the front page. Leaked phone talk between Obi Oyedepo causes furore. And the writers here that says it is mischief, subterfuge, a deep fake. That is Obi Dirty Campaign Council. I've never campaigned for anybody or spoken on anybody's behalf, says Oyedepo. And Obi's desire to be president has died a natural death. That is according to Festus Keyamo. Unauthorized wiretapping of private telephone conversations worrisome, says Ogundamisi. Now, those are the writers supporting the front page, the major story on the front page of the Nigerian Tribune. Moving on to other news now. Nigerians will not cease demanding restructuring. That is according to Shoyinka. Obedient passenger to appear before Abuja Airport Magistrate today. And NDLA declares prophetess celebrity couple wanted over seized illicit drugs. Rivers Police explain detention of election materials after release of lawyers, and arrest of lawyers an aberration. Proof Nigeria is dysfunctional, says this is according to lawyers themselves. Moving towards the top of the front page there, Governors, CBN, EFCC, ICPC, FIRS meet on Tuesday on security votes, cashless policy. And finally, on the front page of the Nigerian Tribune, why EFCC was involved in 2023 general election. That is according to Power. Details of that story can be found on page 25.
All right, up next is Leadership newspaper. And on Leadership, from the top of the page there, we have bandits attack Niger communities, kill 13, abduct scores. We already have innovators sue INEC for 77 billion naira over e-voting copyright theft. We also have new Lagos Airport Terminal, federal government to demolish $300 million aviation facilities. Governors meet EFCC, ICPC, CBN over security vote tomorrow. Police obey court judgment, release 67 vehicles to Shiite members. Agora policy to federal government, fortify anti-corruption measures. We also have the lead story here that talks about still the leaked election phone call of Peter Obi. So with this, we wrap up this particular paper.
Next, we'll take a look at the Business Day newspaper, and the major headline on the front page reads, big story, losers trump gainers in Nigeria's Naira redesign. Fintechs gain as CBN Bank's customers lose. And still talking about the business day. Nigeria stocks break 4-month rally after elections. Lagos, 4 others, owe 34% of state's 5.34 trillion naira domestic debt. Leadway becomes first insurer to cross 100 billion premium income. And these are the major stories on the front page of the Business Day newspaper this morning.
And with that, we're done reeling out some of these stories on front pages of the national dailies. And with that, we'll, introduce our guest. This is a constant person talking about Mukhtar Suleiman. He is a political affairs analyst. Good morning.
I feel like it's important to always introduce me. Good morning.
In as much as you come in every Monday, almost every Monday.
Almost
it's nice
every
to
Monday.
have you here, by the way. Always.
Nice to have you too.
All right, so let's start with the lead story on the Daily Trust newspaper and almost on every other newspaper, talking about the leak audio phone call of Peter Obi and Bishop David Oyedepo. If you had a chance to listen to it, can you just give us your take about it?
At first, when I saw the video earlier yesterday, the audio rather, when I heard it, I listened to it with some level of apprehension because I was like, we know how tech has actually grown. So to say that this was an actual conversation, you have to be a bit more careful with how you see things online. So I was like, I'm sure that this is just a political game. So only fast forward a few hours later, Kenneth Okonkwo came in and confirmed that the audio was legit, but it was taken out of context. Now, however the context, whatever it is, I think to some high level that was really wrong, owing to the kind of campaign that he ran. And to say things like this is a religious war and all of that was a bit disheartening and sickening to hear. So I'm a comms person. I don't think Kenneth Okonkwo did a good thing with the way he approached the issue. I understand the level of honesty you want to give, but then you have to use some sense of discernment, especially when it's a very tricky angle. But that said, my major concern beyond the audio is now who wiretapped his phone. To what extent was that wiretap influential in the entire electoral process? So that would be my major concern, because I know that he didn't record himself and leaked it. I know that the bishop did not do that. And that was a wiretap. That was not a recording outside of the phone call. It was a recording inside of the phone call. So my question would be, who did that? To what extent did they do that? To what extent did they deploy that said technology that was used? And how did it influence our electoral process? Because now it opens a lot of questions and a lot of, we Nigerians need answers.
But if certain members of the Labour Party camp are saying there is a deep fake, that it was something generated by artificial intelligence and the rest of it, and maybe that's why they're not making any noise about it being wiretapped, because they actually believe it was a deep fake.
Well, if it was a deep fake, I think the spokesperson for the campaign should actually know that. So if the spokesperson for the way Mr. Kenneth Okonkwo made that tweet, he did it like he was present there when that call was made. So if you're there's a difference when something comes off surprising, there's how you react. When it doesn't, there's how you react. That didn't come off surprising to him. It didn't even sound like somebody told him that. It sounded like he was physically present when that call happened and he was just trying to make a clarification. I read the tweet, the thread he did. So saying it's a deep fake at this point and peddling deep fake at this point doesn't really make sense anymore. It's like, already, for me, I think it's already confirmed that it was actually true.
But it's like they're doubling down on that.
Oh, well, it's too late. That's what I'm saying. It's too late to do that. The moment that tweet came out, Pandora's box opened. And it was whatever damage control they wanted to do at that time, it was a bit late to do it, because now they have to do reactive measures. They have to go into reactive measures and not proactive measures anymore.
But, the way it's actually making it look, a lot of people have actually come out to, say what he did was wrong and everything. But I think, from history has actually had it that a lot of politicians actually come out, and use religion and ethnicity, to push the agenda for when it comes to politics.
Peter Obi ran a campaign of two wrongs do not make a right. That's the kind of campaign he ran. He ran on the mantra of we need to change the outcome of the Nigerian polity. And for you to be seen, for this to come out now, and then it's now like, oh, you're not different from every other person. It sort of speaks very poorly of the kind of campaign that he ran and his person as a whole. It's unfortunate that I have to say this because I don't. If you notice, I try as much as possible not to speak to the person of any politician as much as I can. But it's really, really sad that this is the reality we have now, and it interrogates the entirety of his intent when he was running. Because we have a video of Oyedepo himself saying in one of his previous services that he doesn't campaign for anybody, he doesn't push for anybody and whatnot. But only for that phone call to also debunk that, where he's saying that he was going to push for him in the Southwest, he's going to talk to people in the Southwest. So it's just, I don't know, it's just heartbreaking. I'm still trying to process it because one of the reasons I would have wanted him to win was because I felt like he was going to be the catalyst that would change the system. He was coming with a different platform compared to what we already have. And only for us to fight, maybe this one thing might not be, I'm not going to use this one thing to judge the entirety of who he is, but this one thing is significant because it has always been at the fore of our politics. And this was one thing he said we don't need anymore, that he wanted to break the wheel for what this kind of narratives actually peddle. So it's just disappointing.
All right, well, moving slightly away from that, we've actually had across newspapers this morning about a meeting that's going to take place between governors and, of course, the CBN, the FIRS, the EFCC, talking about security votes and, of course, cashless policy. Now, the issue of security votes has generated so much controversy over the years, most especially with the era of insecurity and the rest of it. A lot of people believe that monies are being given to state governors, they've been voting these monies, and we're not really seeing anything effective happening. So, I mean, like, those monies spent on security votes are not justified.
I've always said that one of the most profitable business is war and insecurity. Usually one of the most profitable business. And it's quite unfortunate that the way the security vote system has been structured in Nigeria has been in such a way that doesn't really, let's say, bode well for the benefit of Nigerians. It is why for us at the lab where I work, one of our key focus this year is to focus on procurement, just to see how that concept of value for money for governance is actually gotten and how it translates to the betterment of Nigerians and their well-being. But it doesn't really speak for security votes because it's one of the most uninterrogated side of the budget. We don't even know how much security votes are. Nobody really knows how much it is. So I do not envy the new president-elect, really, because if you see how much issues we have and then you demystify it into smaller bits, you get to understand that Nigeria is on the precipice of, like, I don't say failing, I really don't say failing, but we are hanging very precariously wherever it is that we are right now. And something significant needs to happen, because however the fiscal infrastructure you're going to put in place, if people do not feel safe and secure to move around and conduct businesses, then it's going to be very difficult for them to actually get the dividends and the benefits of whatever it is that you want to do. So I don't know how he's going to do it and what he's going to do and what the outcomes of these meetings would be. But I'm just hoping that eventually insecurity can become a thing of the past, and that we as Nigerians can move and transcend into newer climes where we can make reference to it and say, oh, this happened before, and it no longer happens anymore.
So what you're saying is if the president-elect or a new president can actually tackle the issue of security, then every other thing will fall into place?
For me, I think two things. If I were to advise the president-elect, and I hope that someone who has his listening ear is actually listening to me, I'll tell him to do two things. Every other thing is secondary. First, I know two things: curb insecurity and ensure that there's steady power in the country. Just do those two things, because these two issues have a snowball effect on so many things in the economy, in the social and economic well-being of the citizens in the country. So if he can fix these two major issues, then the next tenor he can focus on other things, but these two major issues should actually be dealt with within the first tenor. That's what I think anyway.
All right, well, still talking about insecurity, it seems, with the elections over and cash now in circulation, the terrorists have actually,
Resumed.
gone back, have resumed. Exactly. And we have so many stories of, kidnaps and actually insecurity on the newspapers today. There's this one on front page of Daily Trust that says bandits kill 7 farmers, abduct 26 in Niger, pick 2 students at Varsity Hostel in Zamfara. Let's share your thoughts.
I heard about that, picking 2 students at university in Zamfara. And I've forgotten who tweeted this, who said, it's so funny. There's no more banditry. It's like the bandits went to vote and they took a holiday within February and March. And it sort of tells you that there's this popular pidgin English saying, if meat's lost for pot, monkey hand with it stay inside house, stay inside that business. So you cannot tell us as politicians that you do not know who the major actors and players of this thing is. The Nigerian government showed us that they have advanced clandestine services that can actually uproot people after the NSAS protest. With how clinical they were able to track monies and follow it to the specific people who were at the fore of the NSAS protest. They've shown us that they can actually do that. That's competence. So to not be able to deploy that same technology and that same effort towards tackling the insecurity issue is somewhat of, I'm taken aback by that. So I've always said do not misconstrue nonchalance of Nigerian government for incompetence. So when competence is not put into right use, you begin to question the intent of governance in its entirety.
But even the army is actually saying that, Boko Haram and ISWAP is about to be annihilated in...
Is Boko Haram still really a thing? Because if you look at the death of Shekau that happened 2 years ago, if I'm not mistaken, 2021, I've been a bit scared about the uprising of ISWAP in the northeast, and what the Nigerian government is doing about that. Because these guys were able to do something you couldn't do. They were, according to the report, they were the ones who took out Shekau. Abi Shekau killed himself after they raided the Boko Haram camp. And you still aren't scared. Like, to what extent, to what needs to happen for you to be able to sit up? Now, these guys have been a tad quiet. What are they doing? Are they really falling back? Is it as an effect of your forces, or are they planning or cooking something? These are the questions that we need to ask ourselves, and that what Nigerians need response to from the security agencies in the country.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, still talking about what the president-elect actually needs to do, or getting stories or reports on pages of the newspapers, that he's trying to figure out how his team is going to look like. He's currently building his team right now. But one thing a lot of people actually say is that Nigerian leaders, they come into power, and then that's when they start figuring things out, when they should have had a plan before it happens. A lot of people are actually of the opinion that he should have had an idea of how his team was going to look like before he actually came into it.
I don't think he doesn't have an idea of how his team is going to look like.
Okay.
I'm sure he did.
Well, there was a period of time that we actually, with a Nigerian president, that we spent months without.
Of course, that was 2015. With the outgoing president, there's no need to. It's public news. Mm-hmm. But I don't think Tinubu should have already had an idea. So many things you can say about Tinubu, but one thing that you can give him credit for is that he knows how to build a team around him of competent people, people who we know that, some of them you trust and you've worked with. Like, I think one of our former person here, who is with him currently, you can tell that he knows how to handpick the necessary hands that are needed to ensure that certain tasks are done. And we're going to want to trust him to do better. I've always said this to people after the elections. Political competition must give way for political reconciliation at this point. Some of us are displeased with the outcomes of the electoral process, but it doesn't necessarily mean that I don't wish him well. I hope he succeeds, because his success for him is success for each and every one of us as Nigerians. I cannot pray that he fails, because we cannot have another 4 years of whatever it is that we have now. We need a better system. So I hope genuinely, and pray that he succeeds and that he puts in place the necessary structures to ensure that Nigeria and Nigerians can lead better lives going forward.
All right, let's quickly take a look at city and crime pages on Daily Trust newspaper 20 and 21. We have a few stories here that I will just pick. After 2 million naira ransom and new bike, bandits free family members, which is actually a good one because, reports have actually been on this particular kidnapping for a while. We also have stop flouting traffic laws. Lagos wants security personnel. We have driver arraigned for killing 3 people in Ogun State. Policeman killed trying to resolve conflict in Niger. Oba Benin suspends chief. Man set ablaze over attempt to steal bike in the Federal Capital Territory. And talking about Edo communities get electricity after 2 years in darkness. These are some of the stories.
But I think I want to go back a little to the issue of traffic laws.
Okay.
I think it's very important for Nigerians to know that it is illegal for any of the, what do I call them now because there are so many, or any of the road safety agencies, VBVI or FRSC, to just stop you on the road unless you've actually flouted a particular traffic law. So if I'm not putting on my seatbelt, a VIO officer cannot just stop me and ask me for my papers. In fact, whenever it is any VIO officer stops me, I ask them, why are you stopping me? First question. I want to ask for your papers. No, but you cannot just do that. Is it that my brake lights were not working? My indicators were not working? I was not putting on my seatbelt? Did I run a red light? Because that's an illegal stop and search.
But they do that a lot in the
I know they do that a lot in the FCT. So I usually tell them, because there was a time that one actually did that and was trying to extort money from me. I said, no, I want you to arrest me. Take me to your office. I usually insist. But please arrest me and take me. Because why? A part of the work we do in the lab is road ethics training for FRSC, VIO officers, police officers. So when we take me to the office, then I'll talk to your bosses who we do trainings for, that this is why you stopped me. And because it's necessary. And then even we were looking forward to saying, okay, those ones who stand by the road, maybe those are the ones we need to call back again to do most of these trainings for, because it's something that happens so much and it's actually wrong. So I just want to put it out there, like Nigerians should actually know that. So you can't just up and just stop me on the road and ask me for my papers. Whenever they do that to me, the first question I ask you is, why are you stopping me?
So do you think the trainings are actually mistargeted? Instead of training the bosses that are in the office, why not train these guys that are actually interfacing with people?
It's actually something it's actually something we actually thought of, and for this year for our road ethics training, we're going to actually focus more on those ones who stand by the roadside, just to make sure that they can actually get most of this knowledge. And the funny part of it is that for some of them, I think they know, but they just, because Nigeria can be a lawless country sometimes, so they just go ahead and do whatever it is that they like either ways.
Because they feel people are scared.
Yeah.
All right, so let's take a look at the lead story on Punch newspaper, talking about the end of tenure. Buhari Oshibajo, 28 governors and ministers to begin asset declaration.
Very important. I think we, sometime between last year and this year, we're trying to work with the Code of Conduct Bureau on asset declaration and seeing how that will work, especially with the fact that the new Electoral Act actually mandates all aspiring politicians to declare their assets, and also mandates the political parties to ensure that they declare spending from the previous elections. Unfortunately, the only aspiring politician who did that was Shore. We're looking forward to a time where all aspiring politicians can actually do that. But then on the flip side, there's also a deliberate clampdown, in quotes, so to speak, that you can observe from the National Assembly to how the Code of Conduct Bureau is being treated. These people don't have their budget released. They don't have cash backing for their budget. There was a time when there and they didn't have a printer. That's how bad it is. So more needs to be done in terms of ensuring that that particular agency has the necessary resource to carry out its task and to be more efficient and effective. I don't know if the president-elect has actually gone ahead and done his own asset declaration prior to his swearing in, owing to the fact that we're looking forward to May 29. But these are necessary steps that needs to be taken.
I hear that they're going to be given forms to do that, of the members.
Yeah. I think because it's very important for them to do that. It's part of the democratic process to ensure that there can be checks and balance about how much you got into office with and how much are you living.
But this lack of resources of the CCB, do you think it's actually you could relate it to why most of these asset declarations are really not, we're not getting what we require out of it?
I've always said that. Like I said earlier, it sounds like a deliberate clampdown from the National Assembly, because the CCB does not really answer to anybody per se, but the National Assembly has to approve its budget. And for how many years now they haven't.
Does that have to do with the act setting up the CCB itself?
Not really the act. What do you mean by the act setting?
I mean, like, what did the law backing the setting up of the CCB itself? So that where they get the allocation from, or where the money is.
The allocation is supposed to come from the National Assembly. I think it's supposed to come from surplus and some other places. I can't really remember, but it's supposed to come from those places for the Code of Conduct Bureau to be able to function. But they never get cash backing. While there's a budgetary allocation, cash backing for that budget usually doesn't come.
So where's the money?
Very good question. Very, very good question. Because that particular, it is the mother agency for anti-corruption in Nigeria, and yet the EFCC is more funded, the ICPC has more resources, but the CCB, it's a bit shaky. And they are supposed to operate on 12 codes, and this is just one code. Asset declaration is just one code of their 12 codes of operation, and they can't even get it right because of largely because of the lack of resources that they're actually facing in the Code of Conduct Bureau. So more needs to be done. We're looking at the possibility of actually working with them, but of course, with the polity changing governments, what that would mean for appointments in different offices is also something we are looking at. So we want to be a bit careful, but we're looking at how possible it would be to empower the Code of Conduct Bureau to be able to do more with what they're doing. Maybe more or less like a government CSO relationship to see how we can upscale their impact.
All right, let's quickly take a look at this particular story. We all know the first quarter of 2023 has been rough on a lot of Nigerians, but despite that, investors made 1.6 trillion naira gains in the first quarter, and they actually made this, especially consumer good firms actually made a lot of money in the first quarter.
Nigerians are always ready to spend. We're a spending country. It is why for most European businesses or American businesses, however deplorable they want to say we are, they are always open to doing business here, because one, we have a market over 200 million, and not just a market, we have a market that is ready to buy at every single time. So we're always spending money in ostentative goods sometimes, and since we are not a producing nation, of course we're going to spend a lot of money on consumer goods as well. So, and with the rising inflation, despite the fact that we're all complaining inflation, people are still spending money in their millions and hundreds of thousands. So it's really not really that shocking if you look at the consumer behavior. If you study consumer behavior of Nigerians in the market, so that it's been a bit, even despite that 1.something trillion, I'm still sure that it's not as much as they would have made if the cash crunch didn't happen, if the inflation didn't happen, if elections didn't happen, and all of that. I think that sort of also affected outcomes and output.
All right, well, so still talking about money and how it's been spent. There's a story here on the front page of the Punch newspaper that says Chinese loans rise by 209% under Buhari. Should we be worried?
See, if you know how loans work, to a small extent, I'm not going to speak to the technicality of it because I'm not a specialist. But if you know how loans work, while we say we should be worried, I would also say, because everybody is owing everybody.
Okay.
At the end of the day, the only problem I have with how we do our loans is that we take the loans and we embezzle it. Not spend it, we embezzle it.
Okay.
If we take the loans and then we invest in the country properly, effectively, the way we should, then it becomes easier. There's no country without a loan. Everybody's owing. US is the biggest OSF. So the biggest debtors in the world. But you just need to be able to decide how we're going to use this loan to ensure that there's judicious value for money whenever it is that happens. Now, the terms of the Chinese loans, I don't know. But international markets, I don't think there's really that much. I just hope that eventually, when we move into the next government, there should be increase in our foreign reserve. We should be able to increase our GDP as a country, especially with Dangote's refinery coming up. Hopefully, at least 2 of the 4 refineries we have in the country can be operational as well, just to cut that cost of exporting and importing back again. And also, since removal of fuel subsidy is also still a strong conversation being had, maybe that would alleviate the rising cost of fuel eventually if the subsidy is removed, if we're actually reproducing within the country. So, yeah, I think the loans are something to be. If we look at loans as if I borrow money from you, when from country-like loans, they're not the same thing. They're completely different.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Mukhtar, for analyzing the papers with us this morning.
Thank you very much for having me.
All right, so that was Mukhtar Suleiman, a public affairs analyst with us in the studio. We'll take a break, and when we come back at the top of the hour, the show continues.
But in a situation where you find that they look at the
not necessarily tribal or regional.